to advance. They was calling fouls like crazy. I remember watching that game because before I knew I was going to Philly Dixon, I was rooting for Biggs. He went to Lincoln High School, and we were all cheering and couldn't believe the amount of calls that was made. Now, we all know in our conference, it's very hard to repeat, right?
Yes.
It's very hard to repeat as champions and get to the NCAA. So, it's kind of that, you go through your rough patches and then you reboot and then you come back and you try it all over again till you get it right. That 1988 year was a special year because 87, 88 year because I was part of that recruiting class. Desi Wilson, myself, and I think it was DeJuan Green. And wasn't he the number one recruit up to that point? Because he was the number 2 player from Pennsylvania behind Billy Owens, your home state.
Yeah, DeJuan came in with some great credentials for sure.
Right. So we were all declared, well, they were declared Prop 48. I, for some reason, was declared later on with some problems that was happening with my grades. I don't know, and I don't remember the exact thing. I remember passing my ACT, but when I took the team picture, it was like a week later, you guys put me in the office and said that the NCAA declared me ineligible for that year, which was very disappointing because I was going to leave. I was transferring to a junior college, but my moms wouldn't allow it. So salute to my moms for not allowing me to transfer because I had some good times at FDU. But nevertheless, we went into that year, and I missed out on that NCAA run because that was such an incredible run because you guys had a great team. We had a great team, and we got to the NCAA tournament, and I'll let you take it from here.
Well, that NCAA game was we played Purdue, and they had an outstanding team. Gene Cady was their coach, still one of the all-time best coaches in America.
Yeah,
and he ended up having 3 players that all were drafted in the early second round. It was like bang, and then two steps later, another Purdue player. Then about 3 steps later, the last Purdue player. So they had a really good team, and we played them. We played them at Notre Dame, and we got into foul trouble. Jamie got into foul trouble very early in the game, and ended up only playing, I think it was 2 minutes in the first half, and then foul trouble just took care of us. They ended up defeating us by, I guess it was by about 15 points, and it wasn't that close of a game throughout, just because of them just kind of controlling the game from start to finish. But nevertheless, it was a great experience to go back to the NCAA tournament, and for guys like Damari and Jamie and Kelvin, who had been part of an NCAA team in '85, to go back again in '88 was just great, absolutely just great. And obviously, that '88 team, had we had you, Glenn, and had we had Desi Wilson and DeJuan Green, it would have been. I can't imagine the level of talent that we would have had that particular year with you guys joining in with this veteran team that was just so good. So, the good Lord knows how good we would have been at that point.
Most definitely. Now, after that, it took you guys 10 more years to get back, but we'll get to that point, right? What I want to go through with some things that we discussed early on, and the great thing about my years was getting to play with Charlie Roberts, Brad McClain, Wendell Berriton, and Mel Hawkins, and Desi Wilson, to name a few of the guys that I played against. Desi Wilson was such an amazing athlete, two-sport player, baseball and basketball. And we talked about a few years ago about when you kind of just told me, you asked me the question, do you feel like I held you back? And we had a very honest conversation, because up to that point, I had some just some very dark times about my feelings playing college basketball. And I think me as a grown man, the older I got, the more I understood you as a coach, me as a player during that time, and the sacrifices that were made. Of course, I got hurt coming back my sophomore year, so that put me behind the 8 ball a little bit after having a very hot beginning to my sophomore year, and then getting hurt, and that kind of put me back on things. But I'm glad that we were able to have that talk when we sat down and had a talk at the barbecue, myself, you, Charlie, and Bigelow, how much it meant to me to get past that point, because I feel like if you hold on something too long, you're the one that got to deal with it, and it'll just tear you down. But having that conversation with you kind of cleared a lot of things up for me, and I want to say thank you for having that conversation with me. Appreciate that.
Well, my only problem with that conversation, it was about 15, 20 years too late. So nevertheless, I'm glad we sat down and had that conversation. And if there was any air that was not totally covered, I think we covered everything on that conversation. But nevertheless, we got back on the same wavelength very, very, very quickly.
Yes, for sure. Now, I want to go back, because these are some of the stories that I share with my players when I coached before I start my podcast and had to put the coaching behind. But I remember one day, it was our sophomore years, Desi, Dewan, and I's sophomore year, and I think Brad was a freshman, and we were in 15 games where we either lost or won by 3 points. And coach, in practice, you were just giving us a ripping. And, each player got their own fair share of the Tom Greens whiplashing during that time. But I remember that day very vividly, because when you talked about having that conversation 15 years earlier, 25 years ago, I spoke up for the team, got kicked out of practice. The team followed me to the locker room. And the next day you called me in your office, and I thought you was going to take my scholarship away. And you sat me down and you told me, you said you were doing that to see if one of us would step up to the plate, because at that time we had a young team and we were looking for some leadership. And I spoke up, and you made me co-captain, I think, with Charlie. It was Charlie's senior year. And I'll never forget that day, because I always tell my kids, sometimes a coach is going to test you to see how far or what you're willing to do. And it's not to be disrespectful. It's just to see how much of a ball player or how much of a leader you can be. So those are another thing. And you became the second coach to bring that leadership qualities out of me. So I want to say thank you again for that. For sure. Brad said he remembers it like it was yesterday. That's true. Yeah. So that was amazing. That just showed you.
Y'all ready? Y'all ready? Y'all ready? Yeah. You have just stepped out into the world of